evening and welcome to Connecticut Politics TV Live with Joe Aguiar and Michelle Bohtello. And Michelle, things are getting a little bit clearer here in the election picture. We'll dive into the local news, things affecting Connecticut, and we'll also be joined at 5:30 by Green Party 3rd Congressional District candidate Justin Polino, who, like our good friend Dr. Amy Chai, came up a little short on their journey against Rosa DeLauro, but we'll get to that a little bit later on in the show.
Sounds good. How you feeling, Joe? I heard you were sick.
It's I tell you right now, and again, I'm not trying to push things on people, but got a flu shot earlier in the year. I've had the flu, hasn't been a terrible flu. I just feel like I can't quite get rid of it, but I had the flu 8 years ago, and it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
So it's been since 8 years you've gotten sick? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you get the flu shot every year?
I don't get it every year. I get it when I hear them say, oh, this is one of those years you should get the flu shot. Those are the years I do it, you know?
Right.
Otherwise, I'm trying to build up the immunity.
Well, I'm glad you're doing better. You sound better.
Well, thank you. And so far, this has been a fun kickoff to our brand new show here on Connecticut Politics TV.
And again,
Live.
I want to thank you for being so gracious. I'm a kind of a novice, and you are the professional, so you're very gracious with letting me talk, even when I stumble. You have no problem. But you always pick up the pieces for me. I'm impressed.
Michelle, you know what? To me, it's all about giving people a voice, and I think that's so important, whether it's co-hosting a show or interviewing somebody. I'm just always trying to draw out what the other person has. And you're you have done so much. You have so much experience in the real world that, it's just a matter of us making sure we tap into all your areas of expertise. So you make it very easy.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. And the 5th District is my expertise, so I will get into the news. So Jahana Hayes has won re-election in the Congressional 5th District in Connecticut. I mean, I kind of knew she would, and I wasn't sure, but it was a really close race. She fended off challenger George Logan. He was a former state senator in the 3rd District of Connecticut, New Haven area. But he moved into the 5th District to run this race. And I think he did a great job, by the way. So Hayes obviously defeated him. He linked her a lot to Joe Biden, the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if I've received tons of letters because I'm in the 5th District about her stance on inflation, and that she claims that she saved the economy. The Democrats saved the economy. Do I agree? I'm going to leave that up to you guys.
It's funny you say that, Michelle, because that's one of those things where, and I saw the ad that was run, and in the line she said was the Democrats single-handedly saved the economy. Now, what she's suggesting there actually is that they passed the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes, that's right.
And they had no Republican support on that. Now, here's what we do know about that bill. Hasn't had major impact on inflation.
Correct.
And the Republicans didn't support it. So, again, from the measurable standpoint, I think they said now inflation is 7.7%. So another little dippity-do. I will have a little bit more on that coming up at the end of the newscast. But to say you single-handedly saved it, you sound like FDR in the 1930s, right? Like,
yeah.
We'll see about saving it, in the next couple of months as winter rolls in, and obviously, people are very concerned. Seeing inflation drop again, I would say Democrat or Republican should be happy about that.
Yeah, and
especially because it's after the election now. Now it doesn't matter.
That's true. I'm sure I'm not seeing inflation drop, and maybe it will in the next couple of years. And I think that's where they're banking their stance on. But we shall see. We just hope that somehow, some way, maybe taxes will be cut. I think in Connecticut they're considering it to continue the gas tax, keeping it cut. So inflation, we can stave off inflation somehow, some way. We can't live like this. I don't know about you, but I can't afford anything. So
yeah, it's unsustainable.
It is
I mean,
unsustainable.
every bill, every grocery shopping trip, it's more than it was last month,
Oh,
last week.
absolutely.
And yeah, again, that is unsustainable, but hopefully things work out. For anybody who was concerned about the voting and the counting in this race, George Logan had a team of lawyers and election workers for the last couple days investigating everything. Nothing out of sorts from Team Logan. And I think it's interesting too, Jahana Hayes said she wasn't expecting such a close race and mentioned the attacks on her integrity, including the idea of her being anti-police.
Right.
When in fact her husband spent 27 years with the Waterbury PD as a detective. Like it's again, Michelle, you and I talked the other day about this. The idea of saying things that are like patently false about another person is unproductive. And I think if we learned anything, and from a lot of the exit polls that I've seen, people don't like negative attack ads. Number one, I think politicians and campaigns need to know something. People aren't stupid. When there's two different ads running and one says this person hates America and the other one says this person loves America, they know one of you is lying. And it kind of makes that whole argument moot because their thought is, some things are unknowable. And it's like, well, it's not. But again, I don't think that these things are helpful. I don't think that they're necessary.
Right.
I think George could have ran a more above board campaign against her. Again, highlighting, well, she said she saved the economy. Does it feel like it's saved? Again, without even criticizing or making an assessment, false or otherwise, about the economy, just remind people, hey, remember your last... The best meme I saw, and people obviously didn't take this to heart too much, but it said, check your 401k and your grocery bill before you go vote today.
Yeah.
I understand the appeal to that. I would say, too, though, Michelle, by and large, I don't think people hold the Democrats completely responsible for inflation.
Well, I think the vote showed that. The election showed that exactly. And in regards to, the attack ads, people should be excited about election time. Let's go out and vote. We have a good candidate. But instead, I don't know about you, but I cringe when I see those commercials and the constant mail. I was even talking to my mailman. He's like, I hate election season because he's just constantly bringing this stuff. So yes. And this is where I heard Ben Proto speak today because you had mentioned about George having a speech and kind of conceding to Jahana, and he stated straight out, he said, we understand George lost, but, there was shenanigans going on. He kind of inferred that there was some sort of shenanigans, why Salisbury couldn't have the rest of the votes input. The Secretary of State, claimed that, one city had 0 votes for a candidate. The other candidate had 500. And, what he was explaining was, for a little state, we need to get this better. I mean, we need to get election season better. We need to get good candidates. We need to get our election reform done in the sense of, I'm thinking about Europe. They, France, 32 million people, they get it done one night, it's done. We can't even, we have runoffs. We have people talking about, I'm dying to see who won. Why can't I know by 2 a.m? It's frustrating.
I think, and I've said this to people before, and some people hate the idea of this, but I think we need a federalized voting system whereby every state has the same rules, the same time frames. And that way we're all voting in the same way. There's the ballot here, the hang and chads there. The only way you're ever going to avoid that, because listen, state to state, and it's, Stephanie Thomas, who won the Secretary of State's race, took some criticism for saying there's no such thing as a 0 fraud election. And she's right. She's,
of course,
you don't want to hear the Secretary of State say that, but again, at the same time, of course, there's going to be
What are you going to do about it?
shenanigans of some
Yes.
sort. You're is it going to be enough to impact the election? Clearly, right. Logan's team and Ben Proda didn't find anything that was going to change the results of the
Right.
election.
Right.
I do think it's interesting that Ben Proto is talking about shenanigans when, again, I think he should be focused on the entire Republican Party.
I
It's
agree.
broken in Connecticut. It needs some serious fixing. It needs to be rebuilt. It's not competitive at all. And I think people are tired of it. If we're going to be stuck in a two-party system, all we're asking is that the other party bring viable candidates to the table. Some of the extreme views of Republicans, it just doesn't play out with most
Right.
Americans anymore. It doesn't.
Right.
You're in Connecticut. It's a liberal state. You're going to have to take a moderate stance on things. It doesn't even make sense, Michelle, especially knowing, right, some of these, and there's some really good Republicans, but for the ones that are out there with extremist views, it's like in a million years, there will never be enough votes for you in Connecticut to achieve your ideological agenda. So just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah,
You're in a state
absolutely.
where it's not going to fly. You can have your opinion, but I wouldn't run on that. Or at least I wouldn't run candidates that are doing that. And I think that's something Ben Proto really has to walk away from this from. And I think the other big thing, and, I really came around on Bob Stefanowski towards the end there, right? We talked about this. It is high time, though, that we start running governors who are
With experience.
members of the Republican Party before they start running for governor.
Right.
And it's time for the Republican Party to start supporting the candidates and really pushing these candidates. And they get very disconnected when it's a Tom Foley or a Bob Stefanowski or a Linda McMahon. And no offense to those people. Glad that they want to spend their money trying to get into a job that they're not qualified for necessarily,
Right. Well, one of the reporters at the press conference this morning asked, "Oh, do you think you're going to run George again?" Like he had any say, but and Ben was like, "You know what? Let's take a respite, obviously, and let's go to a spa." He mentioned, but he said George is a good candidate. George, he's a likable guy. He's a nice guy. He kept saying nice guy, and he's got good policies. But forgive me, I ran with George. I went to many RTCs with George. I didn't hear one policy come out of his mouth except for those talking points. There was Republican talking points about inflation, which, of course, that's the number one issue, and that was my number one issue too. But I kept asking how, and I just never heard that. So, yes, you want likable candidates. It's important, but at the same time, you want strong policy behind what you stand for. And with Jahana Hayes, for instance, people know what she stands for. They either love her or they hate her in the state. That's what I noticed when I was talking to voters. So yes, we need to get like you said, the candidates need to, I don't want to say better quality of candidates, but candidates who have the backbone to stand up for what they believe, to stand up for what the voters believe.
As close as this race was, Michelle, I have to wonder if George came out and really focused on the economy, less on attacking her, more on here's what I would do, here's where she's going wrong. I wonder if that would have inspired, just those last few votes that he would have needed to put him over the top. But I think it is clear that attack ads are not where it's at, and I'd like to see those go away, to be honest.
Yes, I agree.
Meanwhile, Connecticut residents did wake up to a much bluer state than the day before. Connecticut Democrats have maintained their power. They've actually even made some gains at the state capitol after the midterm election. As for what the plan is going forward, they claim their plan is simple. It's going to be to continue to progress what they've already made. Governor Mott even suggested that he's not going to wait until the new legislative session in February to get to work. He's considering calling the General Assembly into a special session to provide residents with extended relief before the state gas holiday expires at the end of the month. I hope he does this just for all the people that are like, it's going to go up right after the election. And, it's like, do you think this guy just did that because he doesn't care? I mean, that's a pretty obvious one. It's a pretty easy one. The gas tax holiday, to be honest, it's costing the state a ton of money from the
It
Special
is.
Transportation Fund. It's not really giving us much relief at the pump, to be honest. It's the thought that counts. It's like that every little bit that helps kind of
Oh,
thing.
that's a good point. Yes.
And I mean, it does. It's unfortunate, but it does sort of all add up. And so kudos to the governor for, and I think if the Democrats are smart, they will come back early here. They will do a special
Yeah.
session and they will do some things. And I really think they should. And I think one of the things they really need to focus on is the elderly. Been
Big
talking
time.
to so
Big
many
time.
people,
Yes.
Michelle, elderly
Yes.
residents of Connecticut who
Yep.
are concerned about being able to swing everything with the high price of home heating oil. So
Well, it's
again,
funny
if they're
because
good,
no, our two most vulnerable populations are children and the elderly. And it
mm-hmm.
just seems like they're pushed off to the side. And this is a lot reason why I was running too. I just couldn't take it anymore. I know yourself, you have elderly parents. I do too. I've worked in the school system. I've seen the children. I've seen what's happening. And there's no rhyme or reason for this. This is where we need to step up for these people. We have to take care of them. We're the richest country in the world. We are a rich state. We need to start taking care of our elderly people. Yes.
Yeah, we most definitely do. All right, you are watching Connecticut Politics TV Live with Joe Aguiar and Michelle Bohtello. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with more headlines around Connecticut.
This is the home of the CT Strategist Report with Daniel Kent Newmeyer. Interviews with Connecticut's top leaders, expert political analysis, news, commentary. Gain the insider's perspective.
We are back. Joe Aguiar, Michelle Bohtello. More headlines. Another one of these. Alex Jones just can't stay out of the news here in Connecticut County.
Yes. InfoWars host Alex Jones and his company were ordered by a judge on Thursday to pay extra $473 million. That's over the $1 billion. Is that correct? Over the billions he had to pay?
Yeah, that $965 million that he was forced to pay. Yeah, just a few weeks back.
That's a B, correct? Billion? Is that right? Yeah, he was forced to pay an extra $473 million for promoting false conspiracy theories about the Sandy Hook school massacre, bringing the total judgment against him in a lawsuit filed by the victim's family to a staggering $1.44 billion. Connecticut Judge Barbara Bellis imposed the punitive damages on the InfoWars host and free speech systems. Jones repeatedly told his millions of followers that the massacre that killed 20 first graders and 6 educators was staged by crisis actors to enact more gun control.
Michelle, here's the interesting thing about Alex Jones's claim is that what's really changed in gun laws since then, right? They banned assault rifles in Connecticut, grandfathered the ones that were already here. So if you already had an AR-15 before Sandy Hook, you still have it. You can, I'm assuming you could still buy things from out of state. So nothing really changed. And to all of my far right friends, I've said to them since they started saying this 30 years ago, I'm like, if they were coming for your guns, what have happened already? It would have already happened. It's not going to happen. And I got news for anybody who ever thinks, the Second Amendment, you know what it takes to repeal an amendment?
Yeah.
You need 3/4 of the states and 2/3 of Congress to overturn an amendment. The chances of that are slim and none.
But we really can't neglect the thought, though, that they do want to come for our guns. I really feel that. I feel like when I was running, I had so many people email me. So what's your stance on the Second Amendment? And I'm a staunch, believer in protecting your home. I know you are.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it does give me a little bit of fear that, them constantly bringing up this gun control. And you know what? Yes, we do need it. But at the same time, I think we need to focus more on crime control, more punishment, more accountability for these people that commit crimes, and let them know that if you commit this crime, this will happen to you. And I know that, that's the Republican talking point. But I really feel like we've kind of come to the point where, because I think initially the stance was, we need to help and rehab these people. And I get it. But, then it gets further and further. Well, you know what? They don't belong in jail anymore. Let's, reform the bail laws, what have you. I think that's the problem. It just keeps moving the goalpost, if you will. So I think we just need to start getting a little bit tougher on crime. I mean, we do have gun control laws.
Yeah, we do. And most of the gun control laws are nothing but a nuisance to gun owners.
Yes.
And so my whole thing is that, look, if you're going to put some sort of set up gun control where it's illegal to sell a gun to somebody without a permit, laws that would prevent criminals from getting guns. I think that's where the focus is. I spent a lot of time talking to Brooke Cheney, who's a gun rights advocate, and her main focus is on suicide and violence prevention. And she says,
her, yes.
"Oh, she's fabulous. She does a show actually on our network here, and we'll definitely have her on the show. She's
that'd be great. Yeah,
such a smart person, and has gone to Washington D.C. to speak on behalf of gun. What we need is a violence prevention program.
Oh, I love it.
Right, because look, at the end of the day, a gun is a gun until you turn it into a weapon by turning it on someone and firing.
I mean, on that point, you can say a car is a weapon. You could
say, knives, scissors, pretty much. Look, if someone's intent on harming you, they're going to do that.
That's right.
What we need to do is get people to stop acting out against each other and wanting to hurt each other. And we're going to do that through violence prevention. Right.
Oh,
that's going to be our best bet, because otherwise, you first of all, in keeping alive the notion of they're coming for the guns, you're just emboldening people like Alex Jones, who has tried to hide behind the idea that he's a free speech advocate. He's a Second Amendment, rights of, and it's like nothing that you're saying is helpful. You are not allowed to knowingly and willfully lie, especially if you're profiting from it. That's the very definition of what slander is. And that's why he's suffering the consequences that he's suffering. And Michelle, you've known me for a while now, and you know how important it is to me that factual information.
Yes.
If you don't know something, you don't have to talk about it. That's the beautiful thing in this country. So often on the radio, somebody will call up and ask me about something. If I don't know what it is, I'll say, hey, listen, I'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll go home. I'll do some research, and I'd be happy to talk about it tomorrow. I'm not going to talk about it right now. I don't feel like I would be bringing anything to the table. I don't know enough about it. So if you have questions about whether something is true or false, it's best to just err on the side of not airing it then until you can confirm things. So there's really no excuse for what he did and the things that he said and for how long, he continues saying those things. And literally right through the ruling today, he was still referring to these things as a joke and ridiculous. And all you can do is hope that at some point, as he's starting to cut these checks, that he realizes there's consequences for the things that come out of your mouth.
He's going to have to sell body parts. But this is the problem with these conspiracy theorists. I mean, they're on both sides. And this is what gets people riled up. This is why people, come to the table and say, no, this is, you're wrong or you're right. And this is the problem. Like you said, there's no facts. It's all conspiracy. And this is where it hits on people's emotions. And we can't have politics running on emotions. There's too many politicians that do run on emotions, and it gets on, it gets people, really riled up or not. This is where facts come in. We need strong people to counter this, if you will. So yeah, I know it's pretty impressive what the punitive damages on him, and I'm not condoning what he did. If he wants to bring this, about, it's a sad situation, but it's a high price to pay.
I'll be honest. I've been very surprised by these dollar figures.
Yeah.
And I don't know what calculations they're using to get there. And again, they can make them pay whatever they want. It surprised me it was that high. I was afraid it was going to be a low amount where split between people, it
Right.
wouldn't be enough. So,
Right.
you know, again, let this be a lesson to people, though, to not spread lies.
There
It's
you
not
go.
healthy.
Accountability.
It's
Yes.
not
I
healthy, and there
agree.
is a
That's
penalty
right.
for it.
That's right.
Meanwhile, this was supposed to be the big red wave this midterm that former President Donald Trump could triumphantly ride to the Republican nomination as he prepares another run for the White House. Instead, after Tuesday night's disappointing performance by the GOP, there are questions in the party about Trump's appeal and the future of the party, with some asking him to tap the brakes for right now on making any sort of announcement. The party instead is asking Donald Trump to focus on Herschel Walker and the runoff next month, which is
How you feel
so
about that?
huge for Republicans.
Yeah.
Michelle, I suspect this is a little bit of, I almost want to say, if Herschel Walker ends up losing this runoff, he's done. That's the end of Trump.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, that's a good point. Definitely his candidates didn't fare as well as he wanted them to in this election. But I think still he has a strong base throughout the country.
Yes, he does.
Not in Connecticut.
Not in Connecticut and not in the upper echelon of the Republican Party.
Yes,
That's where he's
absolutely.
lacking his best support.
Right.
So
No, you're right.
it'll be
You're
interesting.
right.
I really think that, and again, in asking him to hold off on announcing, I
Yes.
strongly suspect this is if he can get Herschel Walker through.
True. That's very true. And, you know, it would have been nice if he just, you know, gave his money to these candidates and say, you know, go do the best you can, and kind of stayed back out of the scenes a little bit. I think people would have, you know, maybe feared him better in that aspect. But, you know, especially with him talking about Ron DeSantis in a certain way, you know, I know bad things about him. This is where he lacks. He really has to get someone who could tell. And I don't know if it's possible to get someone to tell him, you know, Mr. President, please, let's act this way and not that way. Because, you know, I like his policies. I think it's good for America. But yes, he just has to stop being so bullish, if you will. So, and this is where,
as a person who used to read the New York mags as a kid, the papers, you know, the Post, the News, and all that, as somebody who grew up in the Entertainment Tonight era,
yes,
I've been aware of this guy, and I found him to be so amusing for so long. Such a good character, right? Sort of, you know, the perception of what being a hotshot Playboy American was.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched The Apprentice. I was a big fan of that show.
Yep.
I remember when he announced he was running for president, I thought, oh my goodness, this could be cool. And I watched him come off the escalator, and then he opened his mouth, and I thought, oh my God, what is going on here? And that was the beginning of the end for me. Well, and
I agree. But I like, you know, I like his force. And I really feel like when you have a government that, and this is why I like that we're Republican and Democrat, in the sense that in the legislation right now, in the executive branch, because this is how compromise happens. You know, you have now, you know, I'm sure that you have this red wave, or excuse me, lack thereof, but the GOP did take over Congress, and they will, you know, stop Biden's agenda. So in that aspect, I like how he was forceful. You know, he said it like it was, if you will. He could have said it in a nicer way, but so Ron DeSantis brings that out really good. He controls himself, but this is what we need. We need strong candidates. We have countries who hate us. So to me, I like that. Is it too much? Yes.
He's a smart enough guy.
He is.
And
absolutely.
He's a charming enough guy that if he wanted to turn it on and be a likable person, he could do it very easily. Right. And I've really, honestly, over the last 6-7 years now, thought at some point someone somehow would be like, Trump, dude, what? Like, come on, what? Just let's go. Get on the same page with everybody else. And I think you could turn it. He just really never did it. And
well, you know what? You don't become a billionaire I guess, being nice.
Fair enough.
So I guess maybe we'll give it to him, right? Anyway, price increases moderated in the United States last month, the latest sign that inflation pressures that have gripped the nation might be easing as the economy slows and consumers grow more cautious. Consumer inflation reached 7.7% in October from a year earlier. That's 0.4% from September. And the Labor Department said Thursday the year-over-year gain was the smallest since January, excluding volatile food and energy prices. Core inflation rose 6.3% in the past 12 months and 0.3% from September. Even with the last month's tentative easing of inflation, the Federal Reserve, is widely expected to keep raising interest rates. That's so frustrating.
It is.
To try to stem persistently high price increases, which it hurts us all, but it hurts really the people who live paycheck to paycheck. Many economists warn, though, that the continuing aggressively tightened credit, the Fed is likely to cause a recession by the next year. Of course, if you're going to raise interest, even by 0.25%, it's going to cause recession. It's simple economics. So far this year, though, the Fed has raised the benchmark interest rate 6 times in sizable increments, heightening the risk that prohibitively high borrowing rates for mortgages, auto purchases, and other high-cost expenses will tip the world's economy into a recession.
Yeah, the Fed's hiking the rates, and I've talked to some people about this, and people are like, no, that can't be right. The whole idea here is to keep poorer people from being able to afford things.
Exactly.
Like, just to put this plainly and bluntly, when poor people can't afford stuff, the prices have to drop because it's a supply and demand market.
That's right.
It's a terrible way and has terrible ramifications on real human beings. But unfortunately, in order to tame the recession, like that is, and Jerome Powell has come out and basically explained this a couple of times now, that this is what has to happen. Part of this due to obviously all the money that flooded the market as the pandemic was going on and in the aftermath of it. And the Democrats did, by the way, continue to feed the American people money right through July of 2021. So it certainly has contributed to inflation. But again, understanding how inflation is going to eventually end is awful. It's such an awful thing.
It is. I mean, less money chasing more goods. And I think it's cruel to cause this, because I really do believe they caused it. And now to punish them for what they did, everything is just so temporary. A good leader should think about the future and what people are going through. But unfortunately, I think in temporary election year, let's make it look like we're doing good, and then boom.
Speaking of good leaders, Green Party candidate Dr. Justin Polino, who ran along with Amy Chai in the 3rd District, is our guest. He's going to join us right after a quick break right here on Connecticut Politics TV Live with Joe and Michelle.
Want to have your show on CT Politics? If you produce a show on CT political issues or commentary and want to play it to the world, contact us now at ctpolitics.tv. We'd love to have you part of the team.
And welcome back to Connecticut Politics TV Live with Joe and Michelle. Our guest now is Dr. Justin Polino, who ran as the Green Party candidate in the 3rd Congressional District. How did you feel on election night? It was your first run, and it was for Congress, no less. I know you had a bit of a get-together at your place, I think, and had a whole bunch of people over. What'd you do?
Well, actually, I ended up having a Zoom party with supporters and people that night, and we watched the election results. It took too long. I was exhausted from the day, and, by 11 o'clock at night, I have to go to bed. I knew it would be overnight before we got any results. I felt great on election day. I went from polling station to polling station. I talked to people. I met people that I had heard of, but I had never met in person, because, a lot of politicians and activists are going from station to station, like I was, and had a lot of great conversations with them and with voters. My favorite experience of the day was there was a woman who was coming to vote in New Haven, and she was planning to vote straight Democratic ticket. And I talked to her. I gave her my pitch. I told her, I'm Green Party, but, I want to see universal health care. And, she thought about it, but she didn't say whether she would vote for me. She went in and she came back out and didn't talk to me. She went to her car. But then I was heading to my car, and she decided to get out and say, hey, I want to let you know that I've always only voted for Democrats, but tonight I voted for you.
Awesome.
And, it was a great feeling.
Justin, why do you think voters are leery to vote for Green Party candidates, for independents, for the third, they call us minor parties, if you will, but the third parties, why do you think voters are leery? I have my thoughts, but.
Yeah, well, I have my thoughts, and I feel pretty strongly that it's Duverger's law. So it's fear of the spoiler effect.
Yes.
So
I heard that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you hear it all the time. People are afraid if they vote for a third party candidate, they're going to tip the election between the remaining candidates.
Right.
People still are going to have a preference among the candidates that are remaining. If their first choice doesn't get elected, they still want to have a say. Like in the Georgia election, you notice it's not over. They're going to have a runoff, right? You know why? Because nobody got 50%. Nobody got 50%. And there's only 2 states in the country that do it that way, but there's a lot of countries that do it that way. They have runoff elections when no one makes 50%, and they do it to make sure that whoever wins has majority support. The reason, that race was close, right? Warnock, it was like 48% or something.
Right.
But those 4% of voters, now they're going to get their say on the runoff election, right? And that way and that's what instant runoff does. That's what instant runoff voting does, but instantly. That's what ranked choice voting is the chance for those people who wanted to support a different third candidate. They can still have their vote count towards their second choice. And so I really think that that's it. That's the answer. There are a lot of other things going on the way third parties are suppressed, but I think the main driving force is just the phenomenon of the way we vote. It's called Duverger's law in academics, is that, and you have a voting system like ours called a plurality voting system, where somebody can win with a plurality, meaning they got the most votes, not whether it's a majority or not.
Right.
That tends to have a two-party outcome, because people are afraid of throwing away their vote, afraid of tipping the election. That fear is pervasive. And so many of us are voting out of fear and not voting out of, not voting our values, not voting for what we really want.
So that was a great explanation. Would you go a little bit more in depth what ranked choice voting is for our viewers?
Sure. So ranked choice voting is also called preference voting. Instead of voting for one candidate, you indicate your preferences among all the candidates, or among your top favorite candidates. You rank them in order of how you prefer them. So you indicate your first choice, you indicate your second choice, you indicate your third choice, as many as you want to. You're under no obligation to rank all the candidates. And it solves the vote splitting problem, because again, if once you've filled out your ballot, they all go in, they look at everyone's first rank votes first, and maybe they'll see, Democrat 48%, Republican 46%, Libertarian 3%, Green 2%, Independent 2%, whatever it is.
Right.
And whoever is the last, who comes in last on that count, all those ballots, they go back and look at and say, well, these voters still deserve a say. What's their second choice? Now that we know that their candidate that is their first preference can't win, let's go back and look at their ballot and see who's their second choice and give their vote to that candidate.
Yeah.
So they still get a vote.
Right.
It's a system that has been used in Australia now for over 100 years.
Wow.
And
A
apparently it works
100
well.
years. Yeah. Oh, I had no idea that it had been around that long.
And they really long time. We're kind of late to the game in getting away from the two-party system. Europe has a lot of parliamentary governments that allow more proportional representation. So they've got a lot more than two parties usually
Right.
in their government.
Yeah.
And a lot of Latin American countries seem to have runoff elections like they're going to have in Georgia, which also addresses the problem. Because if you know there's going to be a runoff, you can feel safer to vote for your first choice in the first election
Right.
a little bit. But again, ranked choice voting is something that's tried and tested in Australia for over 100 years. And they use it for their legislative house, the upper and lower house. And they have a diversity of parties. You know, they
It would be
don't
nice
they
if
don't
that
live
helped our electoral system.
what?
Our election system needs to be helped. That would be nice.
Yeah, a reporter called me today and asked me kind of why do you think the Republicans are less supportive of ranked choice voting? I guess maybe that's true, but the Democrats haven't passed it either. But it's really a nonpartisan reform. It's really a way of trying to make the ballot more representative, and because people don't just have one choice. People don't just have a first choice. I don't just have a first choice. When
Yes.
like they've used the analogy, if you go into an ice cream store and your favorite flavor is strawberry and they say, sorry, we're all out of strawberry. You don't say, well, just give me anything. I don't care. You're going to have a second choice.
Right.
You're going to have a second most fair. So we need that in our elections.
And in that point too, not only don't they give you a choice, but they actually push that strawberry flavor on you. This is what you have to. Yes, that's the only choice you have. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the two-party thing feels very much like we are being cornered in. It feels kind of like you're being told to be afraid to vote third party, and but I get why voters are afraid to vote third party at the same time.
Yeah.
The other thing what makes me interested really about ranked choice voting is we see it in sports. From the MVP award, you rank your top 10 and then they tally up all the writers and people who get more first place votes, do better than people that get all 10th place votes. The AP poll in college football, same thing. They're just taking everybody's collective top 25. They put it together and wherever you average out is the order that they tell you that you're ranked. So for most men, they don't even realize how much they love ranked choice voting because that's literally a big part of what sports is.
Yeah, I mean, they use it in some other things. I think maybe the Academy Awards. And now they're using it for the Democratic primary. It makes sense in any election where there's a lot of choices. Really, any election where there's more than two choices, because like say the Republican primary where Donald Trump won, right? He didn't win with a majority. He won with a plurality because there were like 8 or 9 candidates in that election.
Right.
And so say there was just a Trump vote and an anti-Trump vote. That's kind of not the case, but philosophically, Trump had his supporters, but all people who didn't like him, their vote was split among all the other 8 candidates. Right? Because I mean, it's one way of looking at it. with a ranked choice vote. But I mean, that's just an example, but it really is nonpartisan. It's not a pro-Trump reform or an anti-Trump reform. It's not a pro-Democratic. It's not pro-Republican, but it does make room for more than the major parties. And the more people vote third party, the more it is in the interest of the major parties to adopt ranked choice, because the more votes
that's right.
the
That's
major
true.
parties Yeah, right. The more votes the major parties are losing to third parties, the more it's in their interest to say, hey, maybe we can get some of those votes back as second rank votes if we give people ranked choice voting. So that's why I say a third party vote is a vote for ranked choice voting.
No, that's a great
Even if
point.
we don't get into power as third parties,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
puts pressure on the parties that do have the power to actually pass it. It makes it in their self-interest. It's an offer they can't refuse in a way.
Yeah. Listen, could take another quick break. We'll be right back here on CT Politics TV Live with Joe and Michelle, our guest, Green Party candidate Justin Polino. We're back next.
CT Politics, we're cutting out the political bull. Yeah, I guess that about sums it up. Join in the fight now. Go to ctpolitics.tv to join the Connecticut Taxpayers Union.
Oh, sorry.
And we are back. Michelle, just back in a Justin, let me ask you this. What is next for you? Because I think what I would like to see, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'd like to see some rallies for the Green Party and some events, and maybe get some people out and kind of drum up support, because my fear is that people are going to forget about all this stuff, and then, a year from now, when it all fires back up again, it's like right back from the drawing board. How you guys maybe kind of keep the groundswell rolling forward?
Well, that's going to be my number one goal and my number one job between now and the next election, is trying to build the party, trying to grow the party. I like the party. I fit well in the party. My values align with the party. And so I think a lot of other people's do as well. But we, like that face-to-face interaction I had with that woman in the parking lot, that's the kind of thing that you need to do to grow a party. You need to establish trust face-to-face with people and have the conversations. And after that, maybe they're interested, maybe they're not. But we do lack for people right now in the Green Party. The same forces that push people to vote for one of the major two parties, this plurality voting system, also prevent people from wanting to invest their time and their energy and their money into third parties, because again, they're worried, well, all that effort, is it going to make a difference? Is it going to, I clearly believe it's worthwhile, not just because it's pressure on the system to adopt ranked choice voting, but I think that we have to, I think people want to hear third party voices. And so the work has to be done to build those third parties, because we're trying to represent people who don't feel represented by the major two parties. And, the Independent Party, the Libertarian Party, all the third parties, right? That's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to try and, build the party. I want to focus in New Haven. And so I'm going to try and figure out a way to do that, because that's the heart of my district. I'm out in the Shoreline chapter, which doesn't include New Haven. It's just the way our party's organized. And I'm going to have to figure out a way around that. Well, I'll figure something out. But
well, you answered my question, actually. I was going to ask you if you'd ever consider running Republican or Democrat, only because I know I was Amy Chai's campaign manager, and she had the possibility of running as a Republican. And with seeing her voting, seeing her votes, the amount of votes she got, and what Rosa DeLauro and Leslie Donatis got, if Leslie, who didn't even want to run on the Republican ticket, and if Amy was there, she would have done pretty well. And, we had talked about, well, you can't have any type of reform or any type of policy action unless you get into office. And so, but, Amy said to me, I don't want to be I don't want to be partisan. I don't want to be part of the party politics, if you will. And so it's a fine line. Where do you think, it sounds like you're very passionate and you really want to get things done. And that's the point. But because even I was running as a Republican and then, got into the Independent Party, but it doesn't seem like there's a clear path for the third parties. I mean, I don't, we can work hard, but So where do you see yourself? It sounds like you will not run as a Democrat or Republican, but you just want to kind of work hard to kind of push that third party.
Yeah, that's the path that I'm settled on, and I did wrestle with that for a while, and and because the argument can be persuasive to say, well, if you try to work within one of the parties, the major two parties, you are going to have a more of a shot at real power that you can use, and there's merit to that argument, but I'm putting. I don't like the two-party system. I'm not happy with the two-party system. I don't want to continue the two-party system. And I'm kind of putting my energy where my beliefs are. I believe we'll be better as a country when we escape the two-party system. I believe we'll be less polarized. I believe more people will find politics something that's not so toxic and something to avoid. I want people to feel like politics is a little more civil and enjoyable and important, and not just a tug of war. I
Well,
I
it's
just
funny.
feel that
It's funny you say that because, if you think about it, 41% of this state is either independent or unaffiliated. So they must have the same mind frame that you do. But why can't it be put into practice? What do you feel about that? Do we lose Justin?
Seems stunned and shocked by it.
He
I'm seeing
does.
some swirling circles. I think that yeah, over 60% of people say we'd like to have more than two parties. And there's so many unaffiliateds and independents in our state and elsewhere. But when people go to the ballot, they vote strategically, meaning
Right.
meaning they prejudge who on this ballot really has a chance of winning. Right? They look at the polls. They've been listening to the polls. They don't just think, who do I like the most? That's the problem. They think, who here really has a chance of winning? I'm going to narrow my choices to one of those, and I'm going to vote for one of those. And they do that, again, out of fear of not having a say between the viable candidates that they have a preference on.
Right.
So it marginalizes anyone who's not running in the two parties. And so people say they want more than two parties, but they also want to have a say. If that party that they prefer is not going to win, they still want to have a say about who's going to win between the Republican and the Democrat. So the only way to give them everything they want, to give them both of those things, is ranked choice voting.
Ben Proto in the speech today, while George Logan was conceding to Jahana Hayes, he stated that Connecticut was a split ticket state. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with him. I mean, I agree with people they see Democrat, that's just usually the first line. They kind of go down the line, and the same with Republican. Do you think we're a split ticket state that people kind of want? People know their candidates?
A split ticket state meaning
someone will vote for Joe Schmo as the Democrat, and then they'll vote for this one as a Republican, and maybe look, an independent, I'll vote the independent. So it's kind of, they'll vote all over the ballot. I don't think that's true though.
I don't know. I hear some people say that I'm not married to a party. I'll vote for whoever I like the most. But that usually means the Democrat or the Republican.
Right.
Right. And I think a lot of unaffiliated and independent voters are the same way. I just think a lot of people, we're all in the same boat. We all feel coerced into voting duopoly, as we call it here in the Green Party. We all feel coerced into voting for one of the major two parties for fear of the one we like less winning. And again, I run third party and I vote third party as a way of putting pressure on the system, because the system has to change. And there are people working within the system to try and change it. And I appreciate that as well. I know Josh Elliott is big, has been the biggest champion of ranked choice voting in our state legislature. And Ned Lamont has come out stating his support for
He
ranked
did
choice
say.
voting.
We'll see if it happens.
We'll see if it happens,
Yeah,
but he's
yeah.
on record saying it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah,
Justin, it occurs to me that the Green Party feels like a Gen X idea. Like if it was ever going to really grow, that would have been the time and the people. I noticed in looking at the polls yesterday, Gen Z saved the Democrats from annihilation to the Republicans. If you're looking at the numbers, if you're able to build out the Green Party, do you think that the Green Party still has relevancy with younger people today, or is the idea of saving the earth, is that lost on these young people?
Well, I tend to get the impression that young people are more concerned about the climate issue than older people just in general, because they've got a long time ahead of them to worry about the climate getting worse and worse and worse. Right? I mean, I think that's borne out. There's a lot of young climate activists, and I think that there's a lot of them who feel more and more of a pressing sense of urgency, and more of a fatigue with seeing nothing of any substance really being done by our government to stop what's happening with our climate. And so I think there's increasing urgency, and I think that is felt most urgently by younger people. And I go to a lot of the climate rallies, and there's the New Haven climate movement. That's young. That's run by very young people. There's also Sunrise Connecticut, and maybe they have a New Haven chapter. But New Haven climate movement is a lot of really young, passionate people who are really fighting hard. They do good organizing. They get Justin Elliker to come out to their rallies a lot of times. And it's groups like that give me hope that they're really pushing. But what I would like to see is to have these movements feel free to align with the party that I think backs them the strongest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Green Party has got a much stronger position on climate than the Democratic Party. But I think these activist groups, even they feel like, well, that's just a bridge too far to support a third party. Even they look at the political landscape and think, well, we've got to pick between the lesser of two evils. It's really sad. I would like to see the Green Party become the political arm of the environmental movement, the economic justice movement, the peace movement, and the movement for democratic reform, including taking the money out of politics. But I've gone to a lot of the activist events, and they have the same kind of reservations that many voters have about supporting third parties. But I'm going to keep trying. I think there's going to be, when you look enough, you'll find people who are of the same mindset as myself and who've come to the same conclusions and who want to do the same thing that I'm trying to do. And
right.
you find them every once in a while, and that's a victory. And then you add them to the organization and you try to keep building.
Do you feel like you're making headway, if you will, with parties and this activism? Do you feel like it's going somewhere? Because this is the problem with the two-party system. This is the problem with our government. This is the problem with our country, if you will. We talk a good game, and I shouldn't say things don't move forward. They do, but maybe they move slower than some people would like or what have you. But do you think you're making headway? You feel like you are. Do you feel like people are listening and really kind of reacting to what, your passion is?
I see people reacting when I talk to people on a one-to-one basis, that's when I see reaction. And that gives me hope that, if I can, find some agreement
one
with
person
this one
will make
person,
it.
I know there's more people out there like that I can find. The problem is, there's 700,000 people in the district.
Yeah.
There's 250, there's 250,000 voters. How do I can't go out and talk to all of them. So I have to kind of remind myself, there's only so much you can do in a day. There's only so much you can do in a year.
Right.
And you have to try and keep hope alive and keep pushing. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, as MLK said, and so on and so on. I mean, you gotta hope, because the only other alternative is despair, and I don't want to go there.
Well, I'm sure Joe would agree with me. You always have a platform here.
Yeah, 100%, Justin.
Cool. So remind me what this platform is. So this is, I'm happy to discover it. So this is CT Politics.
It's CT Politics TV. It's on Amazon, Roku, and Fire Stick. So it's on all the smart devices. There's an app. It's also on YouTube and Facebook. So we're pretty much everywhere at this point.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you're making your voice heard.
Justin, where the young people are at?
The cool people.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm hip.
You're cool.
Well, listen, yeah, I mean, as you continue to do your thing and to build out the Green Party and try to reach all those young folks and people like me who really care about this planet and can't for the life of us understand how other people are like, that's fine. You'll always have an opportunity to come on here and talk to us about
absolutely
all this stuff. 100%.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. And, keep the conversation going. Media is such an important thing. I saw that Paul Bass is stepping down as a leader of the New Haven Independent, but he's going to stay on as a managing editor. But Paul Bass has been an institution in New Haven for so long.
He's such a great guy. He is like the only one as far as media that would really pay attention to all the candidates and actually, want to give them a voice so voters can choose. He's a really great guy.
Yeah. So thank you guys. That the role of the media is so important in keeping the conversation going. And we have conglomeration of media, and we have for-profit media that just if it doesn't sell, you're not going to see it on the air. If it's too boring, if it's just civics, or I think but people care about their local politics, and if we we got to get that out there. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Like I said to you before, Justin, I've been guilty of this myself, just not knowing the minor party candidates, and it's a disservice to us and to voting in general. Like, if there's going to be additional candidates, you owe it to yourself to know who everybody is, and like you say, pick the person that best aligns with your values.
We need to start vetting these candidates. Yes. Enough voting party, just party. Let's learn about these candidates and what they stand for. Absolutely.
Right. Well, the time is now, and it's on. Justin Polino, we really appreciate your time, as always. That's going to do it for tonight's show. For Michelle Bohtello, I'm Joe Aguiar. Thanks so much for joining us on CT Politics TV Live.